You know, it's all fun and games until the target designators start ringing home. Yep, that's right, the Society A division is thrown in onto a hot conflict on Akuts. Come on, Defler, what happened? We used to be such bros. We had an agreement and everything. We weren't going to take any more territory from each other, but yet, here we are. He decided to go ahead and throw on 3 whole clusters of units against the 1 cluster that was just sitting on Akuts, honor dueling, and just kind of looking fabulous. I mean, I know what happened.
You whimpering worm!
Because, I mean, yeah, clanner's gonna clan, and the Cheaty Tech Alliance of evil schemes is gotta do what the evil schemes do. And, frankly, I was a little weak, so naturally this is the only outcome that's going to come from that. Of course, we could be attacking our mutual enemies, but what's the fun in that? Beta Cluster has taken up the stand against the Society A division on that tree-ridden dirt hole known as Akuts. They've been here this entire campaign because, frankly, I never really trusted the Society A division, and neither should you. Or really any Society member for that matter, because they are dishonorable dogs that will stab you in the back at the first opportunity because they are completely honorless. Meanwhile, the Society A division has thrown aside the gauntlet of dueling and thrown on for a full offensive using a Jagatai, and several other Society mechs in a rather expensive Nova C3 system. Jade Falcon defenses get the opportunity to set up in an ambush, and that is exactly what we're going to do. As you can see, the units that you can see right now are deploying in a visible position. You can see in all these locations are where the infantry are hiding and where an aero platform is sitting. But you'll see in a minute that it's not going to matter where he's hiding because he's going to have to start firing almost immediately. Meanwhile, the Society A divisions begin splitting itself up, moving 2 piranhas on the northern end of the board near my son up there in the tie, and there's going to try a wide flanking action while the heavier units slog it through the trees to the east. Now, it's important to note on this particular map, anywhere you can see one little cluster of trees is actually a gaggle of them. That tree and all the hexes right near them are all light woods hexes. So this whole board is one really heavily wooded mess of trees. And I'm going to do everything I can to keep that to my advantage. I can't jam a Nova C3 network, so what I'm going to end up doing is I'm going to try to use the trees to my advantage to try to block as many firing lanes that he has so that we can hopefully just make sure that he has to come gun to gun real close to me, because that Thor with its AC-20 and the Nova set where it is in this hex right here allows it to be able to focus in on anything and protect itself rather well. Naga deploys some fast cam minefields in the distance because, yay, we're throwing honor out the window because we got a C3 network. Might as well throw on the mines. He does manage to tag the Fire Falcon a couple times in this hex right here for just doing nothing other than sitting around and looking innocent. I can't really blame him. And as he begins swinging around trying to close the noose on the Jade Falcon forces, he moves the Cephalus up in a very interesting position up through the narrow avenue of trees onto the nearer edge of where the Naga is. Of course, this assault is a little bit rebuked because the trees are blocking all the line of sight from all those C3 units back into the back end. So he's negotiating the terrain back there, moving relatively slowly while the Cephalus begins charging forward to get close range mods on things that the heavier units can't even see. Meanwhile, the Jagatai decides to make his presence seen at the very least as he crosses the board at altitude 9 and begins considering the places where it can drop all its ordnance. It's going to try to make an attack against the revealed Thor, but as you can see with the flat mod from doing a level bombing and dropping from altitude 9, it's going to be super accurate. For those that don't know, the mods work out something like this. It's a +4 for just being a high altitude level bombing, and it's another one for another +9, which is just his altitude. You just add his altitude. So it's +13 on top of his gunnery mod. So you can imagine how that works out. And the rounds start landing everywhere. Boom, 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 boom. Doesn't get anywhere near the target he was going after. But he only dropped 4 bombs, so he's going to come by and probably be a nuisance again at a later turn. And while the Aero 4 support does have ADA rounds, they're too busy hitting the Ostian indirect, and the Supernova reveals itself, hex into the heavy woods, and just plasters the Ostian, who fails his piloting skill roll and falls onto the ground. And the 2 piranhas on the northern end, and the Ostian begin swinging in on the artillery elements for the Jade Falcon. But unbeknownst to the Society members, they are actually walking into a fairly decent platform. The Naga can actually defend itself to some degree, and the poor turret, the missile turret, the arrow trailer, just really isn't that useful to shoot at. Not with the inventory that's on the piranhas. As such, the Naga can probably deal with its own for a little while. There's probably better things to take on the piranhas, but I'm willing to let the Naga just soak it for a turn in his dug-in foxhole in the woods back there. Thus we come to something of an impasse for the Society. They can either continue moving the flanking elements, the Cephalus, on the western side of the board. They tried moving the piranha through the water and managed to get to the other side of the woods right here, and I continue to initiative sync against. And in a turn in which they might not have wanted to, the Society moves the piranha in a way to escort the Ostian to keep it from getting ambushed again, and pushes it away from the woods. This leaves a huge opening, as he was considerably concerned with the Fire Falcon sitting in the woods, that he left the entire flank open. It's going to be another turn or two before they're able to come back, so I leap the Thor away through the woods to take on the piranha and let the Fire Falcon double back. We no longer have to deal with those heavy hitters from the Society, and we're definitely never going to deal with them in an open field. Jagatai comes back onto the field, going a little bit lower and slower this time to try to take on the Thor that he is trying to get rid of. This time he's going to attempt to dive bomb against the Thor, which is probably a little bit easier to do. He's going to try to alpha strike all the ordnance that he still has on the Jagatai to do something about it, to buy just a little bit of time for his rear forces to tangle with my artillery support. But he's going low and slow, so the aero platforms are immediately going to switch over to the ADA mode and start shooting that heavy fighter down. That's too much BV not to fire at. Meanwhile, the Supernova struggles with its heat load, having alpha striked at the Ostian in a parting blow. The Ostian in turn napalmed the woods in front of it, trying to create some sort of smoke screen between it and what might be other assailants. Joke's on him, though. He actually hit a hex that was full of infantry. But being fire resistant, it just doesn't matter. He grumbles a bit about it, saying something to the effect of, the C3, it does nothing, because really engaging that Supernova in its current position requires the Cephalus to walk through heavy woods to do it. It's more or less a death sentence for the mech. ADA rounds mostly go ineffective, or at least the one launcher that launched an ADA round managed to miss. The Naga pans its guns around and decides to go ahead and direct fire the Aero 4s at the Cephalus. We're going to go ahead and take the flat mods for shooting at that chameleon monstrosity rather than try to let an actual unit take care of it. Jagatai loses its pylons onto the forest and manages to hit a whole lot of diddly, putting just a few points of damage on the Thor, managing to tag the Supernova just by chance, and nearly eradicating another point of infantry that he couldn't even see. Cephalus did not like getting a face full of Aero 4. It manages to shirk it off, but it fails the PSR and crashes into the ground. The Jagatai shakes off all the incoming fire, managing to make not only its control roll from the one hit it took, but it manages to otherwise be almost completely unaffected. The piranha that ironically came out of the water manages to fall flat as the infantry leap out of a hidden position and start attaching satchel charges to the sides and ankles of the piranha, blowing out its hip and causing it to crash amidst a score of infantry with no support nearby capable of lending it a hand. Meanwhile, the pariah-esque Septissima begins moving through the woods up closer to the Jade Falcon positions and manages just to land itself into more infantry. As the infantry come out of the woods and starts landing at their feet, they're going to begin attaching more satchel charges and doing anti-mech attacks. We're going to make this a slog. And because the Cephalus ran through the area and didn't manage to stop and actually scan, he completely avoided ever picking them up. Naga continues to make a rough go of it as he loses more armor on the right arm, and the piranha manages to start throwing a bunch of MG crates into it and takes out one of the arrow launchers. That's kinda rough. The other piranha lumbers forward trying to get away from the infantry, but it just has barely enough movement to be able to make itself vacated from the immediate threat. But it is in no way going to be able to get away from the Thor and Fire Falcon nearby that's going to be able to chase it down and give it 1-2. This mech was a staple of the Star League Defense Force. Can you guess what it is? That's right, it's a Phoenix Hawk! Phoenix Hawk, that's right. Jagatai makes it back onto the board. This time he is going to focus in on that Naga, swinging lower to the ground. Even this time at altitude 4, he is going to try to do something of it. Approaching from his right side, he wants to make sure that he's going to put at least one of these launchers out of commission, but the Naga is not having anything of it, as we now have nothing better to shoot at. It's going to be arrow 4 rounds into the air every turn, because we're going to put down that Jagatai. The Septissima and the Ostian continue to struggle to make their way up through the woods and are completely cut off from the flanking force that is now finding themselves outflanked and outgunned by the Jade Falcon units, as the Jagatai does what it can to try to even up the odds. And as the infantry are making that deal even worse for the Society, he manages to latch on to the mech, plant charges, and destroy another hip actuator off of the Septissima, sending it crashing into the ground. We've got two mechs with busted hip actuators. The Ostian, being what it is, sees the infantry out in the open, tries to get tone, and doesn't. Not a single SRM or ATM rack manages to connect, leaving the infantry alive for another turn. They're dead out there in the open, and you would expect them to be completely emasculated in one turn's worth of firing, but he misses everything. Jagatai rounds in and starts peppering the Naga, doesn't manage to take out the Arrow 4 launcher that the Piranha already did. In fact, lands a lot of his shots on the left side of the mech, taking the arm almost completely off and causing a crit into the left torso, which the Arrow 4 system manages to be disabled, leaving the Naga somewhat toothless. Just with 3 ER small lasers, it's enough to, concern the Piranhas. And, of course, he can always kick. As we're nearing the end game, the Society really needs to make a play for the win, as they need to push through the woods, make their C3 network work, and take on some of the units on the other side, while the Jade Falcon has thus far proved really inhospitable to such a rapid advance. Even the Jagatai had pause for concern at the end of the last turn, as it received 2 hits from ADA rounds, managing to cripple a couple non-essential systems and cause a couple concerned control rolls as he reconsiders his approach vector to try to prevent such a lambasted amount of damage. Nonetheless, the Piranha continues to hobble forward, trying to get away from the infantry, enacts a run with a broken hip, moves a little, and then busts onto the ground. Again, no support. He can't get no respect. Naga turns around and for some reason thinks he's a 3-5 and doesn't move as far forward as he probably could have to try to continue to teach that piranha who's boss. The last functioning piranha for the society begins moving away, getting up and trying to run back to take care of the infantry that are surrounding the Septissima and generally slowing it down. A busted hip is not fun to try to move with, while the Ostian has done virtually nothing to make his value worthwhile on the field. The Cephalus moves into the woods, ostensibly to start detecting more infantry. It does, as the infantry begin leaping onto the mech, far too close for it to do any kind of reasonable evasive action. Again, it decided to move into heavy woods. Remember? It's a death sentence. Jagatai finds his approach vector, tries to come back onto the field as the Thor and the Supernova emerge from the woods. We're not going to deal with the Cephalus. We're going to try to take on the Ostian that, for various reasons, kept backing up off of the main event as a Fire Falcon sweeps in from out of nowhere behind the Cephalus and really locks it in. It's the Thor, the Supernova, and the Fire Falcon all focusing on the Cephalus because the Septissima has been caught unawares. Jagatai tries to make a difference, but ends up getting a face full of surprise shots from the Supernova and Thor. He puts his flight path right across it. As he tries to put down the Thor taps back with its ultra autocannon and manages to do quite a few crits. Even the Supernova manages to deal quite a few crits. We take the avionics sensors out. At the end of the turn, he has 6 control rolls. The damage alone was already enough to put him into forced withdrawal, but he's not going to make all those control rolls, and he's going to splash into the dirt, going at some variation of Mach. Society Piranha tries to take the infantry off the Septissima, does quite a bit of damage, does not manage to kill them all. Much to his dismay, the Fire Falcon swings behind the Ostian, the only unit that wasn't shooting at the Jagatai, opens up with its guns, hits him in the back multiple times. All the rounds are mostly useless since this is a heavy mech and we are hitting it with light equipment, but the MG array tags left torso, center torso, crit, and there you go. The wonder of the MG array is that we got center torso crit with 4 machine guns. And wouldn't you know it, some of the crits were ones that mattered, taking out the gyro and putting them into the ground. The Ostian almost had nothing to say for the entire fight except for maybe setting a few fires in the woods. And now it's been put out of commission. At this point, Defler really reconsidered his forces. While we hadn't necessarily killed anything aside from the Jagatai, his forces were all facing significant issues and he completely lost the initiative. There was no way that he could combine or maneuver his forces to outmaneuver anything. So he went ahead and called it. It was just a matter of filling in the dots at my own leisure at this point. The Jade Falcon Expeditionary faced a superior foe and came out ahead. This is a Jade Falcon win. How about that? So this fight, you really need to pay attention to what went horribly wrong for the Society. They spent a lot of BV, I think was the biggest problem, on a C3 network that he just couldn't make work. The Nova C3 is impressive, but I was very reluctant to allow him to have a firing lane that allowed him to use it. Any time that a unit had a shot, he was often shooting on its own. The Ostian often made shots, but he was doing it without the C3 network. Now, this has been an Ouchies Batrep, and thanks for watching. And for a incredibly post-edit, the campaign is actually over. There was a lull in the campaign, and the Jade Falcon actually managed to leap ahead of the front runner in the campaign. But as it was, it appeared that that individual, Rod, had left to Bulgaria or something, and it just did not seem right. The only reason it was a very clear sweep for the Jade Falcon at that point is because he had to default all his games, and that's just not how we roll. So we went ahead and rolled back the campaign to the last turn, leaving the Jade Falcon in second place with Rod, who was never actually seen in the campaign at first. Which is actually kind of a shame, since the Shady Tech Alliance, having realized that it could propel one of its members into the lead, actually put together a strike package against Rod such that he would be lucky to have any of his territories at the end of the turn. We actually changed it over to another well-known player, the Chromium Pigeons, but that too ended up getting negged because, come on, it was just wrong. It was just a black alley mugging. There was nothing tactical about it. We would just overwhelm him with the amount of forces from 3 different players. So we went ahead and left the game as it was. It was a good campaign.
3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
You want to kill Uncle Kenny?
Hmm?